Hi everyone, this is a Schecter E-1 FRS. E-1 for the body style, FR for that, and S for that. And this is a screaming guitar. It's got some really good assets, but what I wanted to do is something about the tremolo block, because it's got a Floyd Rose, according to the spec sheet, it's got a Floyd Rose 1500 bridge. And it's got not the greatest of sustain block. Now as I zoom in here, it says 28. But when I looked online for a sustain block upgrade, it said 32 was the right one. So I bought this. I bought a Floyd Rose 32. That is 4 millimeters longer than the existing one. So what I'm going to do is use it anyway and see if it works out. So here's a scale in millimeters, and it's kind of hard to get it in there, but basically if you add 4 millimeters to this bridge sustain block, it still should fit, because you can see this thing's recessed a little ways down into the cavity. So I think it'll still work. Obviously you don't want the springs and whatnot scraping on the cover. If it doesn't work, then I'll just leave the cover off, or maybe even route out the cover, but we're going to see. So I'm going to go ahead and pull the bridge out and put this new sustain block on, put her all back together, and see what happens. Well, here's the size comparison between the two blocks. You can see this one's brass, and it's a chunk. The reason I'm doing this is because I bought a used Strat that had a shallow Floyd Rose in it, and it had one of these, this exact one. There's the model on it. And that thing sounded fantastic. Not only that, it smoothed out the action of the tremolo, in my opinion, because that thing was super smooth. Okay, so let's put them on the scale. Here's the factory one, and it's showing at 3.2 ounces. And here's the upgrade, 5.6. So there's your difference in weight. Okay, sustain block went on okay. One thing I wanted to point out, if you're going to do this, is that there's a shim that goes under this. The diagram shows you which way it goes, but there's no way to center it. It'll mostly be centered because of the holes, but there is some slop in the holes. So that shim, I mostly tightened the screws, and then I pushed it into place to get it lined up the way I think it should be lined up, and try to get everything square. Also, you can see these little scraps of tape. Here's 2 of them left. What I did is I took some masking tape and I chopped it and stuck it on right where the bridge saddles were, because you got to take the bridge saddles off to get the screws out, to get that off. And by putting a little bit of tape there, that preserved my intonation. So hopefully I'll have minimal adjustment when I do get this thing back together. Now, the bridge weighs 15.4 ounces. Only a little bit under a pound. It's a load. All right, there she is. I had to adjust the spring tension, probably because these guys, I think the holes are moved farther forward off of center, because this block is so thick. They want to have clearance for the springs. So that made me have to tighten the spring claw screws quite a bit. Now let's see at the clearance. It's close. You can see that this thing is really close to the top, but that's where the cover is going to sit. And we got clearance. I think it's going to make it. You can't, it's hard to tell. I wish I had something other than a black cover to see this with, but it looks like it's got about an 1/8 inch of clearance. And that should be enough. I tried pushing the tremolo bar, and it didn't really change the height of the springs at all. In fact, if anything, it pulled them down. So there we go. Got a 32 millimeter brass sustain block, and I'll plug it into a Marshall tomorrow night, see how it does. Time to show you guys what this does now with the sustain block in it. I actually tried this on stage on Friday and it did really well. That was 2 nights ago. So that was my road test. I put the sustain block on, threw some strings on it, some quick tests and intonation and whatnot, and put it right on stage. It did really good. Where this guitar was lacking before, this is tuned down a half step. It's tuned to E flat, and it's got Diodario XL 009s on it. That's my go-to string of choice. Those are Slinkies. And it was lacking on the, especially first and second strings, anything above the 15th fret. The notes would just die off. This is not counting the sustaining act. We'll get into that later. Just without the sustaining act, this thing died. It had no sustain, no carry at all in the higher frets, and now it's a lot better. That's about almost twice as long as it would have sustained earlier before the upgrade. This is just me going straight into a Marshall amp. I got the gain turned up to about 2 o'clock. That was a particular dead spot before. As you know, especially if you played bass, every guitar has its own resonating frequency. And sometimes the guitar's resonating frequency will cancel out the strings. And I think I was having some of those issues before, but I'm not having it now. I also believe the guitar's got a little bit more low end now than it had before. It's got just a slight deepness to it. Try the sustaining act just to see if that made any difference with it. I use it in a Judas Priest tribute band, so we got to have a lot of feedback notes, and one of them is this riff right here. So the sustaining act's behaving pretty much exactly the way it did before, which is good. Because I liked the way that worked before. I just didn't like the way the guitar worked without it. And I'm going to say that the 32 millimeter brass sustain block upgrade was a success, because it's made this guitar just a little better sustain without electronic help, and a little more depth on the low end. $34 upgrade, 34 bucks and about an hour and a half of time to put it in. So happy jams, everyone.